You're listening to Inside Lebo, a podcast giving you an inside look at Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, produced by Mount Lebanon's Public Information Office.
Hello and welcome to Inside Lebo. I'm your host, Assistant Municipal Manager and Municipal Planner, Ian McMeans.
And I'm Mount Lebanon's Assistant Public Information Officer and Senior Editor of Mount Lebanon Magazine, Rachel Windsor.
So in today's episode, we're going to talk about something very important to a lot of members of the public, and that is scams and how to spot them, avoid them, and protect yourself from becoming a victim.
And so joining us today is Mount Lebanon Police Chief Jason Haberman. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this very important topic. It's a message that we really want to get out to our residents, and I have a lot of family and friends that live in Mount Lebanon, and I really want to make sure that they're armed with the most accurate, up-to-date information on this subject.
Great. So let's start with the big picture. Scams are becoming a lot more sophisticated every day, and they do target people of all ages. So can you give us a bit of an overview of some of the most common scams that the police department's seeing in Mount Lebanon right now?
Yes, absolutely. So what we're seeing locally is very much a reflection of what you hear about nationally. So the scams that you hear about on the email front, where they'll email something or have a pop-up come up on your computer or call you on the phone even, or text, are very much what we're seeing here locally. Specifically for what we have and what we've been dealing with since January is a number of different frauds related to PayPal, IRS, Microsoft Office, and Norton Antivirus. Those are the ones that we've seen recently where they will say that your account is overdue and needs to be updated. And once, in fact, you get on, they will share your screen or ask to share your screen. And then at that point, you will be defrauded based on their access to certain parts of your bank account or certain parts of your computer and the back end in terms of how you pay your bills. We will tell you, and we will emphasize throughout this podcast and other times we speak, that please do not give money to anybody, ever, regardless of how enticing it may be. The reality with this situation is so grand and getting so much bigger that we really have to be mindful of each other, be mindful of our neighbors, be mindful of our family, be mindful of our friends, and make sure that those who are receiving these calls and receiving these scams call somebody else and do authenticate all of these opportunities, if you will, or all of these attempted opportunities that these people throw at you, and really make sure that you minimize their target pool of victims.
Absolutely. So can we talk a little bit more specifically about those pay now scams? We've heard that scammers are demanding payment through gift cards or sometimes even Bitcoin. Can you explain how those work and how residents can avoid falling victim to them?
Yes, absolutely. So we also have a couple of recent cases involving both of these Bitcoin and money drop scams. So obviously they prey on the emotion of get rich quick. They prey on the emotion of, you hear about the grandparent scams where there is a grandson or granddaughter in trouble. They need bail money. If you don't come quick, then they're not going to be able to get out of jail. All of those things have happened locally. All of those things we have responded to. None of those things are true ever. And when they are true, you're never going to get a phone call like that. There's never going to be such a sense of urgency, even if you had a relative in that situation. They would be able to manage that situation in a much better way with people around them, again, trained professionals who are there that can work through that situation. I can tell you that how it works is this. Locally, we had a case where it was an IRS hook, where the IRS email came in and somebody needed to pay an amount of money in order to satisfy a debt. What they do is they then talk to the individual, the victim, and they talk them into giving an amount of cash. They will then typically have a courier who is set up, ready to go to the victim's address and pick up this cash. After that happens, it's usually an amount to get them on the hook. And when I say an amount, we've had a $15,000 scam, we've had up to a $33,000 on the initial buy-in, so to speak, with those who are perpetuating the scam. Once the courier shows up, there's a password given to the victim. The victim then tells the courier the password, at which point they exchange the money. And at that point, the victim is then in the scam. What happened there and what we've seen is the play on emotion that really is quite significant. They play on the emotion of guilt, they play on the emotion of shame, and they really feel like if they've gotten themselves a little bit deep in this water, so into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, that they can somehow get their way out if they continue through this relationship. And again, these scammers play on that. They play on the victim's inability to recognize the big picture while they're in it. And all of these things come into play. So what they'll do is then ask them for a second amount of money and do a second courier drop typically. We've seen upwards of over $100,000, and we've seen upwards of literally people's life savings that they will forfeit to these individuals. And I can tell you that it is amazing when you talk to these individuals and these victims afterwards. They all have the same sense of, I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but somehow in that moment I did it. And the real sad part for us, and really the unfortunate part, what we're really trying to arm our residents with, is the ability to call friends, dual authenticate. If it sounds like that, call your neighbor, call your friend, call somebody who's not emotionally vested in the situation, have them give you that support, that level of advice. We found that that's usually a disruptive tool that you can use to prevent these scams. In addition, we're rolling out an awareness campaign with our friends and partners in the business community to really identify these individuals going to banks, going to parcel service places, going to hometown mail and other local places. We've reached out to those individuals to say, look, if you see, Mrs. Johnson coming down here and sending a package that she normally wouldn't send to an address in Texas or an address in Virginia, please be sort of on the front lines as a tripwire so we can hear it and know this information. We encourage all of our residents, again, to call us if you feel like you're in this. So getting back to how it works, Rachel, is after they're in this scam, what happens is they've done a number of drops or a number of courier deposits. The courier will then take that deposit to typically it's a group or a couple of individuals who are running the scam. They then will take that money and deposit it to them for an amount of cash for the courier. Sometimes it's pennies on a dollar compared to what you are giving, and sometimes it's more significant depending on the relationship with those who are running the scam. Once that happens, that money is then obviously put in other places in an attempt to avoid our detection from us. And again, luckily, we're making a lot of headway with flipping a lot of these couriers and getting a lot of really good intel and doing those things. So I can tell you that that's really what we're on the heels of doing and making sure that we continue to do. The Bitcoin part, there are a couple of Bitcoin ATMs locally, and I would advocate, based off everything I know and based off of all the research I've done, there's no legitimate reason for Bitcoin ATMs other than scams. I do not know, and I have not come across a legitimate reason for a Bitcoin ATM other than scammers to use it for you to put it in their cold wallet. And I do not know, unless somebody can educate me otherwise, of a legitimate reason for a place of business to house one of those ATMs. So we do have one we know of in Mount Lebanon, another one locally. And I can tell you that the only reason it's there, in my opinion, is to perpetuate some of these scams. Once this happens, they will then ask the victim to deposit an amount of money into a wallet, a Bitcoin wallet. Getting educated on Bitcoin every day. Unfortunately, it's because of these reasons. And I can tell you that what they do then is they will put it in there. And we've had a lot of luck in recovering some of those. Some of the exchanges have become very cooperative with law enforcement. We have task forces set up with our local, state, and federal partners. We are integrated in with our federal partners every day. And we are really on the heels of making sure that these exchanges cooperate, for a lot of reasons, but again, the federal government has a lot of controls over, the accesses of these exchanges in terms of what they can do. But that's why you've also heard of the Recently, there was a gold bar exchange scam. And what they're trying to do is get scams that are not traceable, that are not currency. Bitcoin, gold bar, all these things that are less likely to be tracked by us and law enforcement. So that's how it works. That's the overview of it. Again, we've had everything from the emotion of shame and guilt, where these victims will sit there and tell us that they knew better. And we've even done so far as in a couple of these investigations, knocked on people's doors and said, have you been scammed recently? And they said yes, and I didn't want to call police. And so it's that significant of an emotional play, and that's what we're trying to avoid and educate our residents from making sure that they don't fall victim to.
So just to kind of build on that a little bit, you mentioned some of these sort of high pressure tactics that cause fear and urgency in the victims. So what are some of the warning signs that, you know, a call or message might contain that could tip somebody off that, hey, this might be a scam, this might not be legit?
Well, anything to do with, excuse me, anything to do with an email or a phone text that involve, whether it's the IRS or whether it involves any other email exchange or service that you're a part of, is really what they're going to start to do. And so what they're going to do is they're going to take that information, they're going to ask you as if you need to pay it right now or it will be shut off. Or if you need to pay it right now or your loved one won't be, again, saved from jail or whatever the, again, hoax is that they're running in that moment. So that's typically what they will try and play on this, hey, hurry up and let's decide this or else. And it's sort of that opportunities they take to reinforce that to the victims. And so that's really what we're trying to avoid, is for everyone to take a deep breath and really dual authenticate this information, have challenge questions. Anything to do with, we saw recently an interesting scam involving the purchase of a puppy on Marketplace. And so we've had that where they play on these highly emotional subject matters. We had recently, again, I'll tell you, on a personal note, I'll tell you, I had a Taylor Swift concert ticket invite that, hey, we have these Taylor Swift concert tickets, and these things that they play on these highly emotional subject matter. You have kids, you have daughters, you have a relative you want to secure these things for, whether it's dogs or tickets or whatever, and you want to make sure that they have, you know, all the things they wish for, right? So it plays into this whole thing. And so really the way to avoid it, and I can tell you personally from my experience, you just ask a couple of challenge questions and it really can shut it down very quickly. They can say, hey, I know Rachel, she's a friend of mine, I'm selling these tickets. Well, what is Rachel, where does she work, where does she, you know, live? You can really ask these challenge questions and follow up and really dig deep and almost really re-interview these individuals if they pop up. Whether it's in your social media, they pop up in your email. And you can do that and feel free to do that. You know, if there's anybody who's legitimate is going to have a few minutes of opportunity to take that time to reinforce that relationship, or to say, hey, this is how they know them, this is how they're, you know, became aware of you, this is how, you know, you're getting this opportunity. And again, there's no such thing as get rich quick. There's no such thing as too good to be true. If it sounds it is. All of those things really we've seen that they are. So we can't emphasize that enough, to really talk to a friend, talk to a relative, and make sure you have somebody on standby to do that, and make sure that you're running all of these prospective, again, I say opportunities, but victimizations are really what they are.
And I've even seen a lot of those, like you mentioned, with the concert tickets. Like if a band posts, a message on Facebook or Twitter or social media, wherever, and says like, "Oh, we're having this concert in this city tonight," there will be a lot of reply messages that are like, "Oh, I have 2 tickets available. DM me for information," or send me a message for information. It's like, it's probably a scam. Like not that many people are going to have tickets that they're just posting on Facebook trying to get rid of like that. So
yeah, and again, it plays on the emotion of not wanting to miss out. It plays on the emotion of all of those things, and really, it's a very targeted, calculated effort to defraud people of millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they continue to do it. And people continue to fall victim to these individuals, and really we need to protect ourselves and protect each other. If we really start at the local level, we can really prevent them from targeting our area. And they have a network too. They know they talk to each other, and they target those areas that tend to be fruitful, and we don't want to be one of those areas.
Mm. And Ian, actually, what you mentioned about tickets for concerts sort of reminded me of something that happens quite frequently on the municipal social media sites, especially since we're going to have a lot more events coming up in the summer. We get a lot of comments under farmers markets events or like the Classic Car Show or Final Fridays saying, hey, if you're a vendor and you want to, showcase your product here, message us. Or if you want tickets to the 4th of July event, message us, we'll sell it to you. Those are all scam comments. You should not respond to those people. Same sort of deal as what we've been talking about. So it's just good that you should be aware and make sure to double check the information that you're looking at. And then one more question for Chief Haberman before we head to our break. On a related note, there's been an increase in online phone, text, message and online scams involving political donations or threats. What would you say is your best advice for residents who get these kinds of messages?
Again, we haven't seen a whole lot locally on the political messages. Obviously, the political season is going to be, again, it's cyclical. But at the same time, I will tell you, if you have a question, give us a call. We were always glad to show up and help residents navigate through some of these scams, whether it's by text or phone or email. That's what we're here for. We're glad to be that dual authentication party to look at and say, hey, this is something we've seen, this isn't legit. We are glad to take, again, literally an ounce of prevention in this effort to help everybody make sure that they don't fall victim to this. And that's what 911's there for, that's what we're here for, and we're glad to offer our expertise and really that sort of third-party look at these situations to avoid falling prey to them. So again, I would tell you that all of these things fall into the same deal of preying on that emotional piece, whether it's a political cause you support, or whether it's an environmental cause you support, or whether it's some other thing that really tugs on people's, part of their being that they really want to make sure flourishes for whatever reason in the spectrum of things. And so that's the part that we really want to make sure we prevent from falling victim to it.
Great. Well, this has all been great information. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more from Chief Haberman on scams affecting Mount Lebanon residents. Welcome back to Inside Lebo. We've been talking with Police Chief Jason Haberman about how to spot and avoid scams. So let's talk about some of the more targeted scams we've seen recently. There's grandparent scams, which have been around for a while, but they're becoming more and more convincing, as well as scams where the person claims that someone failed to appear in court or threatens arrest or needs money for bail or something like that, which, Chief, you mentioned a little bit in the first half of the show. So how are scammers manipulating caller IDs, making these things seem more legitimate?
Well, what you're seeing now related to the grandparent scams, and again, we haven't seen this in a while. This is sort of morphed into a few of the other, again, more recent ones that we have related to IRS specifically, but it does, the way they're doing it is because so much is out there on social media, they're building background on individuals. So the way they do this, it's very easy to go on social media and build a background on an individual who you don't know. And what I mean by that is you can look for associates, you can look for people and see who their friends are. So it's very easy, in a very short amount of time, I can go on anybody's Facebook page in a public access domain and build a background on them just simply by what they've posted and what they put out there in a very recent amount of time to the public. So I can say, look, your friend, and name their friend. I can say, I know that they were out at this location last week. I was out with them on this trip this weekend. And all these things that happens, and they build that profile, and they're so convincing in that profile and that story that the grandparent or the elderly victim who they're trying to prey on could not help to think that it has to be legitimate, just because of the names they mentioned and the things that they said. And so whenever you look at that and you were to hear that for the first time, you would think to yourself, there's no conceivable way this person doesn't know my grandchild. They've just built up everything that they do, and they did over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month, whatever it is, and there's just no conceivable way this was fake. And so what happened there is they then hook these individuals, these victims, into the story of, and by the way, here's the situation. I can't get out of jail, I can't get out of this country, we're vacationing in Mexico, whatever it is. They want to say that you have to get them out. And so all of these things really come into it and try and force these victims to give them an amount of money, and they do, unfortunately, on a number of occasions. Again, the numbers are staggering. The numbers we have currently, this is about a $37 billion a year problem. This problem really has multiplied, 18 times since 2017. That's just from the people we know and the people who have reported these crimes. And I mentioned earlier that there's a number of these individuals that don't report it. If it's an amount of money they can live with and they can overcome, they feel so guilty and so ashamed that they don't want to tell their family and friends because they're so embarrassed by it. And we really encourage the other part to this. We'd like to hear about it. If you are, unfortunately, if you have been victimized and this is something that's happened to you and you haven't called us, please call us. There is no embarrassment in this. We really are sensitive to that fact. We want to make sure that everybody knows that we're here to help work through this. And you may have a piece of information that can help us solve some of these crimes and get to some of these individuals that we haven't been able to get to yet.
Yeah, it's easy to see why a lot of people would panic in that situation. What would you say is the best way for somebody to verify if a call like that is real when it's happening in the moment?
You have to have challenge questions. You have to have challenge questions for them. You have to have a friend, a relative, somebody who's not in that to bounce this scenario off of, and really make sure that, again, you're doing your due diligence to understand that this is not likely to be the case. You can call, again, if this were a jail scam, you can call the Allegheny County Jail. You can call numbers that are publicly available. You can call 911, and we can help you work through that and tell you if this is in fact true. We can literally look up anybody who is arrested or in jail locally, or even regionally speaking, to help verify that situation, verify that story. So we are glad to be those individuals to come and assist working through these situations to prevent that from happening. But really, it is very easy, and we understand it. These individuals are very good at what they do. There's a reason that $37 billion plus, and the number is growing, is lost to scammers and fraudsters every year, and we understand that. So it's a big number, and there's a reason for it. This is a very calculated, well-researched crime, and it is affecting pretty much everybody. Somebody knows someone who has been victimized by these crimes.
So it sounds like, for the most part, staying calm, getting in touch with law enforcement is the best approach. Are there any tools or resources the police department offers to help residents stay informed about the latest scams?
Yeah, absolutely. So our community outreach unit spends a lot of time conducting classes and conducting community outreach presentations. They've done a number of them. They continue to update all of their programming to include the most accurate information and scams that are out there. So they have really offered it to a number of different senior groups. We've taught at Brookdale, the Havada South Hills, 750 Washington Road, at the Rec Center, Baptist Homes, others. They've done a number in the last 8 to 10 months. We're really starting to ramp up our public information campaign on frauds and scams. There's a couple of cases that we're really in the midst of right now and in the middle of right now, so we really want to continue to focus on the investigative piece of those scams and those crimes. And then at that point, what we really want to make sure of on the other side with the outreach campaign is make sure that our business partners know, make sure that our residents are aware, and really emphasize the need to dual authenticate, research, have challenge questions, and really have a system set up, whether it's with your bank or your bank teller, or even if you, again, work out with a relative any amount of money over a certain amount that you talk to them about before you withdraw. So those are things that really are going to prevent these scams from happening, that we're encouraging banks, and bank security is on board with us. They've been very cooperative. They at times have been the people who have called. And so we really want to emphasize that point, that they're going to see the anomalies in people's behavior. Our elderly community, as we know, can be very habit forming, and that's just human nature. And so when we start to see our elderly neighbors and friends start to do things out of habits, we need to really make sure we identify there's a reason for that typically. And we want to make sure that we help them work through those things. So those are some of the things we do, some of the classes we offer, and we'll continue to offer those to the community at various times in order to arm them with the most accurate, up-to-date information to prevent them from falling victim to these crimes.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I'll also add that I believe we just updated a page on the police website. So it's mountlebanon.org/scams. So people can just go there and look at information on some of the current scams that are out there, how to, be aware of what's happening and how to potentially avoid some of them, or some tips on what to do if you feel like you're kind of caught in that cycle that Chief Haberman mentioned of being scammed, and the resources the police department offers. So as Chief Haberman mentioned, if people feel that need to talk to a police officer, that we are here to help, to call 911, to get in touch with one of our officers. And you can also, like we said, check the municipal website. The short URL is mountlebanon.org/scams.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Chief Haberman, for joining us today and sharing how we can all stay a step ahead of the scammers. That's going to be it for this edition of Inside Lebo, produced by Marsha Morgenstern, with music by Drew Munyo and graphics by Chris Leeper.
Thanks for listening to Inside Lebo. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Inside Lebo, produced by Mount Lebanon's Public Information Office. Learn more about all things Lebo at mountlebanon.org or by following our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages.